Hi, so I'm Bob Steingart. I joke about this sometimes. I was 6'6" before I started working in startups, so I've been knocked down a little bit. But so I'm currently, I was formerly president of a company called Sensable Technologies, and that's the main thing we're going to be talking about. And I've two and a half years ago, I started a consulting firm focused on transforming technologies into profitable businesses. So I've been at this a long time. I've been with large companies, small companies, software companies, hardware, successful, some unsuccessful also. And as Michael said, you learn from each step along the way. So I'm not going to go through all my background. So I was an HBS MBA many years ago. I was also MIT undergrad and grad, and been involved in a bunch of different companies. We were talking about 3D. I was recently awarded a patent in 3D printing and digital dentistry, so have quite a bit of experience in that space. So let me start off. This is the Sensable story. I was at Sensable for almost 10 years. And I'm going to take you through a few of the steps, because it started off, it seemed really straightforward. It was a really cool product, very high wow factor. So the company was founded in 1993. I joined the company in 2002. We were working in an area called haptics, which is sense of touch, but it was 3D touch. So instead of touch like your iPad or iPhone, we had a device that you could simulate force feedback. So you could interact with virtual objects and feel them. This part's always hard to explain in a slide, but probably the most popular application for that type of technology was medical simulation. So we literally had brain surgeons practicing brain surgery, like on your data. They would do an MRI or CT of your head, and they would practice surgery, and it was wicked cool. But it was a small market. So we had a very cool technology, partly in search of a market. And when I say partly in search of a market, when I joined the company, we were in $5 million in sales. So we were a real company. We had sold thousands of units, high wow factor. So everything sounded pretty good. We were also used in 3D modeling. So Michael mentioned SolidWorks, which is a very popular product for 3D design. We were good at organic shapes. So SolidWorks is great. If you're going to design an airplane, you do SolidWorks. If you wanted to design Mickey Mouse, you do Sensible. So Mattel was a large customer. We sold into like Nike and Adidas. They used us to design the soles of athletic shoes. Talk about a specialized market, but there were billions and billions of shoes made. We were good at organic shapes. So we were good at toys, footwear, and we were good at body parts, because we were really good at mass customization. So if you needed a prosthetic tooth or nose, or we did all the various body parts, and we had customers doing that. So everything sounded great. We had one little problem in 2002, which was the business model was for every dollar in revenue, we'll spend $2, but we'll make it up in volume. And that doesn't really work very well. So, it seems like cool technology, profitable business, how hard can it be? This is sort of the reality. It looks more like this. And I left out a lot of zigs and zags and gaps that there just wasn't enough room on the slide to capture. So we were a classic case. There's scan, design, fabrication. Okay, and this was an example of a athletic shoe. And we loved design. We had engineers. We just loved features. So we had 100 features. We could do the coolest design. And in terms of our product roadmap, we had the next 1,000 features that you could imagine for design. So when I joined the company, the first thing I did is, but it's always good to start with your customers, and work backwards. That's kind of one of the lessons. I'm kind of jumping ahead here. But I visited 20 of our largest customers around the world and just watched them and talked to them. But one thing that was really interesting is they all said, oh, everything's great. Everything's fine. You're all set. But then I did one thing is I said, why don't you show me actually what you do? So I followed them around throughout the day. And just designing something wasn't interesting. Our customers were making things. So the first thing, actually I was at Hallmark, and they were designing toys and things like that, premium toys. And the first thing, they said, everything's great. They said, so how do you make them? They were printing them on a 3D printer. So I said, show me. So I went, and they said, no, you don't really have to see it. The first thing we did is we crashed the printer and we crashed the computer. And I said, like, that doesn't sound like a good thing. And they said, yeah, but it happens all the time, and it just takes us an hour or two, and it's fine. I'm going like, so part of the message here is we wanted to improve integration because our customers weren't into just designing. They didn't want the 101st feature for the design. What was more important, could you get from the design and actually make something? So we found there were a bunch of speed bumps getting from design into manufacturing, 3D printing and mold making. And some of these areas are pretty mundane. Like mold making is not the most exciting thing for most people. But a lot of the parts, things that we buy and make, consume, are fabricated in molds. So what we did is we expanded beyond design. We found that there were speed bumps. We actually solved some of those speed bumps. And voila, you know, we were profitable, our business grew. There was a supply chain side of it too. So I showed, actually I'm going back here, I'm showing a Finding Nemo toy. Because this was a workflow where it started with Disney. Okay, so the design was Disney, they made a movie. Then they turned to McDonald's, and McDonald's said, I want to make 30 million Finding Nemo toys for Happy Meals, and we have like 3 months to do it. So we were able to speed the workflow. So it really was a global chain where we started from Disney into design, into fabrication in China, and it was really cool. But the point is when you actually solve the customer problem, which is like, how do you condense this workflow, it helped our business and we grew. So that sounded pretty cool. I think we're all set. This is showing mold making in China, by the way. But we were venture backed and we were still a lifestyle company. So at that point it was interesting but not interesting enough. So the next pivot got into how do you scale the company? You know, so you have all these cool assets, but what do you do next and how do you scale the company? And by the way, how do you develop recurring revenue? Because the idea of a dollar in revenue losing $2, not a good thing. So we stumbled across digital dentistry. And digital dentistry ended up being a very good application for our technology. But it was an integrated system. It was scan, design, fabrication. And with that, we focused on dental. So we optimized the system for dental labs. And we did all the hard work of integrating these pieces to make sure it worked. Because if you make a prosthetic, like a crown for your mouth, that almost fits, you don't get credit for that. It's got to fit just right. Michael's going to talk more later about partnering and core and things like that, but we couldn't do it all ourselves, so we partnered with a scanning company. We partnered with 3D Systems, which was a printing company. And we spent a lot of time getting the value proposition right. We started with customers. We found a segment. There was a narrow segment within dentistry called partial frameworks. And it's a fairly large market. It's an underserved market. There was a real need, not a nice-to-have need, but a must-have need. And we were able to come up with a product for that. We were self-funded at this time. So we built a product that customers liked. We sold a bunch of them. This was 2008, like when nuclear winter, you know, like in terms of funding, like there was nothing going on. So it forced us to actually build a product that customers wanted, because there's nothing more clarifying than having a gun to your head. So we didn't have it. Everything we did had to be self-funded. So we actually had to build products that customers wanted that they'd be willing to pay for it. And it was a very difficult time for the company, but actually going through that process, there was nothing more clarifying. You know, it really forced us to get it right. So then this is a segue into, we raised more money afterwards, but the big idea was, so we started off in design, but it was scan, design, fabrication. But then when you add materials to it and collaborative software, that's when it gets really interesting. I still believe that this is like a multi-billion-dollar idea. You know, we're just at the tip of the iceberg here. And part of the inspiration from this came from, if you want to design an aesthetic tooth, it's one thing to design it, you know, and just have a CAD model of it. It's another thing to design it and fabricate it so that it could have color and translucency and different material properties. And this, to me, is still an area that I'm very passionate about, and I've spent a bunch of time with Carmichael on this because he has a lot of background in the materials space. And then the collaborative software, software as a service, things like that to tie it all together. So I still believe that this is a big idea. So we did digital dentistry. This was 2008. We sold a bunch of systems. We sold capital equipment. We did want to have recurring revenue. That was really important. So yes, we had software and hardware maintenance, but we started to sell materials. We even charged a small transaction fee for whenever somebody would fabricate a prosthetic using our system, we would charge like a small fee for that. So pivot number 3, we raised money. We raised money from Northbridge and HLM. And we successfully grew the business to 15 million, just the dental side, so that was exciting. Again, sounds pretty cool. Should be all set. But one evening I got a call from 3D Systems, is one of the largest public companies in the 3D printing space. I can't make up stranger fiction than this. The chairman calls me at home one night. We were counting on them to do the service of this $80,000 printer. We're a small company. We couldn't afford a big field force. He said, Bob, we're going through bad times right now. Just want to give you a heads up. I'm laying off the field force tomorrow, and you're on your own. And you go like, oh my gosh. Furthermore, they were going through some issues, so the printers that had a certain degree of reliability dropped by a factor of 10. So they were breaking like crazy. But our business model was do the right thing by the customer. So we did that, but that cost money. The other thing that happened was when we raised money, you'd think that raising money would be a panacea. And it solves a lot of problems. But we grew from 35 people to 70 people in 6 months. And there were some growing pains. And again, it sounds like it should be a panacea, but not that straightforward. So in April of 2012, we ended up merging with Geomagic. And Geomagic is a company that did a lot of work in the scan software space. So one thing you're going to find here is when I talked to the big vision of how it was scan, design, fabrication, how we were going to pull it all together, we were on that path. But one surprise along the way was we thought we were going to do it ourselves. We did it through a merger and acquisition with Geomagic. Pivot number 5 was 3D Systems, which is this large public company. And they do 3D printing. They bought Geomagic and Sensable together. They put the 3 together. So that's currently the way that the picture looks. So what we got to is we got to the grand vision, but we didn't get there in the way that we thought we would get there. But ultimately, these technologies and products came together in a way that served the market. And 3D Systems is doing great as a company.
To that point, let me turn it over to Carmichael, who actually was living at least a part of this story. So Carmichael, help us get the lessons for the class here.
Well, what would probably be the most interesting thing if I were in your shoes is to let you ask some questions. And maybe, and actually let me flip it a bit. Let me ask you guys, listening to Bob's presentation, which was spot on accurate in terms of the history, what lessons would you guess were learned? And what lessons do you take from what Bob said? And you could also ask questions, to get clarification.
So capital expenditure seems to be a pretty large factor in the operating costs of the company, given that you mentioned there are capital equipment involved.
Right.
Is that true in your case?
Yeah, definitely true. And actually, let me just add another comment there, because one trend is like everything can be solved with a mobile app. Well, you can't make a tooth with a mobile app right now. So we had to get involved in some of the kind of dirty stuff, like actual hardware, manufacturing plants, materials. So our system sold for $120,000. So I know one thing Michael's going to talk later about is slippery and things like that, just frictionless. We actually had to build stuff and had inventory and all these things. So the idea of, let's do a freemium app and try it, and I didn't know how to, one of our dreams was, could we take a haptic device and download it, over the internet, and we didn't figure out a good answer for that yet. So yes, it was capital intensive.
And in fact, just listening to what Bob said, we sold a system end-to-end for $120,000, $80,000. Just did you guys all hear how much the printer itself cost? Does anybody remember what the $80,000? So and was the printer our stuff? No. And so one of the things I tell you was definitely a lesson learned is so you're looking at 2/3 of what we were selling wasn't our stuff. And Bob said it right. I'll give him a lot of credit. When we placed units, I mean, how many different countries? I mean, how many?
Oh yeah, just to make things not too easy, we sold around the world. So we'd get a call like, there's a system down in Korea, like, can you fix it tomorrow? And we'd put a person on a plane and send them over there, because our whole thing was around being close to the customer and doing right by the customer. That was one of the values of the company and a key thing. So we didn't want to say to the customer, like, good luck, have a nice day.
Right.
But as a result, we ended up spending quite a bit of money during that process.
Yeah. So 2/3 of what we're selling necessarily, the customer wants the end-to-end solution. The customer doesn't want to have to buy one thing from you and then buy the other 2 or 3 things from someone else, right? All they care about is, I want to make a part, a tooth or something, right? So sell me that thing. And we were willing to do that. And we did it. And look, you saw the revenue grew like $15 million. And they did that, the management team did that quickly. And then the one thing that was the most expensive thing started to fail. And then the large company that was supposed to service it said, sorry, I can't do that. And so these guys had to turn into experts in fixing somebody else's piece of equipment, which was actually amazing, because you actually did it. It just wasn't a scalable model, and we couldn't get a solution to it. So that one lesson learned, if you want to take it, is the idea of, if you're going to have someone else's product as part of the overall solution bundled with your product, you need to be really careful and protect yourself, because otherwise you're going to end up in a bad situation.
And part of it is timing. So in a startup, ideally, you'd be just ride the wave in time. So we knew that the printers were not quite ready. They were on the cusp. So now they've come down to, you can get a printer for $10,000, $20,000, and now they're getting more reliable and whatever. So we almost made it, because we would have been able to ride that piece of the technology curve, but timing just worked against us.
Yep.
Taken from the lessons here, I was wondering if you guys were charging it enough, because there are 2 things. One is you're not selling enough units because you're not selling toys per se. You're selling the machine to design the toys, which makes the toy. And number 2, it seems to me that $400-some thousand, you guys were not charging nearly enough.
Yes, so that's a good question. There's a long answer. I'll give you the short answer. So there's a reality of what the market would bear. We happen to be selling into the dental lab market, which is very price sensitive. So I'm going to make another comment just around our haptic device. It was an interesting lesson learned around pricing. We had our haptic device and software, which sold. This was for making toys and things like the sensor razor from Gillette and stuff like that. We doubled the price, and it was a great lesson in price elasticity, because our volume didn't drop off at all. But we did reach a pain point. At $25,000 for a piece of 3D CAD CAM, we felt like we were reaching the limits of what was possible.
It seems like you kind of developed a product, and then afterwards you tried to figure out how to actually sell it, instead of going through and saying, well, you could do the dental thing, and you come up with, like, say, 20 different uses for it, and then go after those markets. It seemed like you were kind of playing it by ear, learning as you went. And I was wondering if you had a business strategy ahead of time to say, these are the market segments we're going to go after.
That's another good question. So at first, I called it the 1,000 points of light problem, because we were a platform. We were a very cool platform. Each customer was cooler than the next one. We'd say, I talked about the brain surgeon. We'd say, well, it's not rocket science. Well, we had NASA buying systems. But everybody would buy just a few here and there. But part of the reason we focused on dental was we went through a process of actually identifying 10 markets to go after. So we switched it from a technology in search of a market to a market solution play. And we looked at 10 different markets and quickly narrowed it down to the dental. And then it was focus all our efforts on that.
So Bob, I got to ask you a question, just to put myself on the spot here. So you said a couple of times this whole idea of raising venture capital money and scaling and so forth. So including the VC funding, and as you look at what Sensible was doing, was it smart to raise money when you did? Was it what was good or bad about
Yeah.
getting the VC funding? And you told everyone here that you still think it's a big opportunity. So, how would you done? What would you have done different at all?
Yeah, so raising venture money is a two-edged sword. And again, I think a lot of people would hear like, oh, it's fantastic, you raise it, everything is rosy. And it's not on a personal level. Our investors were great, our board was great. But once you raise money, especially from a firm like Northbridge, which is a premier firm, you swing for the fence. Anything short of swinging for the fence is not acceptable. So I showed you that picture, and I say it's the $1 billion idea. I still think it's a $1 billion idea. If I had a picture that said I have an awesome $20 million idea and took it to Northbridge, they'd go like, you got to be kidding. And you can argue about the timing, but once we were swinging to the fence, then we had to go from 35 people to 70 people, and we started doing things differently. And I can't say that raising the money caused these issues, but we could have had a very different outcome without raising money. So it's not it doesn't solve all the problems. Now, raising money is great when you have things figured out, and we had gotten the technical risk out, we had gotten a product that works. So raising money to scale the company, to me, makes a lot of sense. I've worked with other companies where the timing was right, where it pour in money and scale, and it works great. Here, I think we were close to getting the timing right, but maybe not quite perfect.
It's kind of a two-part question. When you say, venture capital and swinging for the fences, but yet a pivotal moment was the fact that you got cut off on customer service, and you were saying that you did right by your customers. However, your supplier didn't do right by you and just cut you off completely. Investment-wise, why was that not addressed prior, and why was it such a heavy reliance on a third party to service the product?
Okay, so this was an $80,000 system sold around the world, and we had one person in field service. They had 200 around the world, so it seemed like a reasonable assumption to rely on their service. So the fact that it was a big surprise actually to Wall Street when they announced this change. So we weren't the only ones surprised. I don't think anybody would have had a good enough crystal ball to foresee that problem. Now, yeah, but we did have a heavy reliance on this third-party product, and there's risk associated with it, no question about it.
So the investment in capital, if you were to raise more venture capital to develop your own product and your own service team for that product, just did not justify it at that stage, or
Well,
was
what
it just
happened
not
is
addressed?
the money that we raised, we thought we were going after the big picture, all of a sudden was going down this black hole called customer support. So it diverted funds. We had all the great plans. Everything was fantastic. But then all of a sudden there was this big sucking sound called customer service. And we felt that we needed to do that to do right to our customers. We hoped that it was a short period of time to get through that. We ended up quickly partnering with a third-party service firm. And we plugged that hole, but it took a few months to do that. But during that time, we bled quite a bit of money.
So thank you for the questions. I encourage you to stay and ask as many as you want later. Bob, would you like to just wrap up by giving us your lessons of what you actually did feel were the ultimate learnings for you here? Oops.
Yeah, so I've said a lot of these things already. So I've been involved multiple times with cool technologies, bleeding edge technologies, and technology is cool. It's it's a great science project, but it's much more interesting to actually put together a profitable company. Everybody talks about must-have problems versus nice-to-have problems, but you better solve must-have problems because otherwise people aren't going to buy it. People are polite, they'll say nice things, they'll take you out to lunch, whatever, but at the end of the day, it's like, will you write a check? Like, no. When you solved a must-have problem, they did it in an instant. One thing that actually surprised us, when we sold this $120,000 system, our average sales cycle was 2 months, which was amazing. Understand the ecosystem beyond your direct customers. So in the case of dental, it's easy to say we're selling to dental labs, but we needed to understand how dentists fit into it, how reimbursement fit into it. So look beyond your direct customer, because only then can you really piece together the whole part. So I've been involved with some companies doing med tech stuff, and they're great ideas, but if the payers and the payees don't line up and it's not reimbursed, it doesn't matter. So I've seen some really, really cool things, but those things have to line up. We talked about product market fit, business model, and go-to-market strategy, getting it right. It's absolutely critical. We felt we had it right. You know, the timing didn't quite work with us, and you know, some things happened. Necessity is the mother of invention. Somebody had asked about the capital equipment. So try building a company with when you have no money. Like, the more you sell, your working capital, the harder it is to grow. You can't even fund inventory. So there was one day I sat with our VP of sales, and we're going like, the more successful we are, we're going to run out of money because we're selling too much stuff. And we came up with this crazy idea, like, how about, can we get 50% down on contract? And we looked at each other going like, I don't know, what do you think? I said, well, that's our new policy. We're going to start that tomorrow. He tried it the next day, and it worked. Solved that problem. Who knew? I don't think we would have had that inspiration if we weren't in such a tight spot. Devil in the details. You know, we had to have parts that actually fit in the mouth. So who knew that the weather, temperature, and humidity, and other factors would affect the fit of the part? So, man, we learned more about materials and all these details to make sure things really worked. I mentioned that sometimes too much money can lead to poor execution. And again, I think we talked enough about that. You know, it's a little counterintuitive, but you know, be careful for what you wish for. And enjoy the journey, because you know, there are going to be ups and downs. There are going to be days that it's awesome and you're elated, and other days when you go like, man, why am I doing this? So, thank you
very much, Bob.